All right, we're going to get started. Welcome everybody to our September edition of the Eastern Canadian CNCF meetup. As usual, we wish that we could be in person with all of you, but we're doing this online again, still. So bear with us. As you can see, we've got some very cute branded masks. I just can't really talk very well in it, but thank you, Archie, for providing us all with these very fashionable looks. So we're very cute in our Kubernetes and Jaeger and Argo masks. So thank you for that. We're going to get started. We actually have two talks today. We're super excited from JFrog and from Elastic. Speakers who actually, well, Baruch has been with us before, and George was the speaker at Cloud Native Day. So super excited to have them, and we're going to get started here. So we are your hosts for today. I'm Julia Simon. I work at a company called CloudOps in Montreal, and I'm here with my two teammates, Chris Carty and Jason Hattie. They are in Ottawa and Toronto, respectively. Chris works at Google and Jason at Ecobee. So we're very excited to be here and hosting this with you. So Chris is going to do some of the CNCF announcements, and Jason will help moderate questions at the end of the meetup. Also, thanks to CloudOps, we're using their webinar account to do this. So thank you very much to them for providing us with the platform to do this. And we want to give props to our other co-organizers who help us in the different cities. So as usual, right now we're doing one meetup. On le fait en anglais parce que c'est plus facile, but we are doing it for the 5 cities in which we normally, 5 cities and beyond, I guess, for that we normally take part in. So that is Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Kitchener-Waterloo, and Quebec City. So we have this wonderful group of people who help us organize in all those cities. And so we're kind of taking turns hosting the meetups and participating in them. So obviously Archie, who is our resident CNCF ambassador, big props to him for keeping this whole group animated and going. Anthony, Souvro, Ray, Chris, Dima, Mathieu Benoit, actually, we're very excited. He's the new kid on the block and joining us from Quebec City, as well as Sébastien, who's also in Quebec City. So thank you guys very much for all your work. And of course, we wouldn't be what we are and we wouldn't be able to do what we do without our wonderful sponsors. So thank you very much to them. We are very happy to have such a wide and diverse group of companies helping us out here. And as usual, we have talks from the community and we also have talks from our sponsors. So today we actually have 2 talks from our sponsors, JFrog and Elastic. And we do want to say thank you to Elastic because they are renewed members sponsoring us. So we're super excited to have you guys on board again. And George is here as well, and he'll be representing Elastic. So thank you very much. And yeah, we're excited to hear from you. Speaking of which, these are our 2 speakers today. So we have George Kobar from Elastic and Baruch. Tell me how to pronounce your last name. I'm sorry.
It's exactly how it's written, Sadogursky, but the best way to pronounce it is just skip it.
Okay, perfect. I'm just gonna go with Baruch then, from JFrog. So thank you both very much for being here. We wish you could have come in person and done the roadshow with us because it's always really fun for us to get everyone in all the cities and moving around like that. But unfortunately, we got to keep going like this for now. So thank you very much for participating, and I will pass it on to Chris, who's going to take it away with a few CNCF announcements.
All right. Hey, everybody. Let me know if you can't hear me. Otherwise, I will just keep talking into the internet. So first off for today, we're doing just some quick meetup announcements. Nothing too huge. Probably the biggest thing that we're all kind of going through right now is to switch over to the new Cloud Native community group. So please let us know how this has gone or going for you on your end. We want to make sure that this transition goes as smoothly as possible for everyone involved. So if you're running into any hiccups or you think that things could be going better, just let us know. I believe there should be a question on this in the survey for the end of the meetup. So again, reach out to us on Slack through the survey, or if you know us through other means, please give us a heads up. As always, you can find us at Cloud Native CA at Twitter. Then we also have a LinkedIn group. I've been noticing more and more people have been requesting to join that. So please join us there as well. We're going to try to be filling that more with some more content. So feel free to join, ask questions, and we'll be putting more things in there as we get used to using LinkedIn. And I think someone asked in the chat about how to get swag. Speaking is always a good way to do that. So if you're doing anything cool with cloud native technology, Kubernetes, what have you, or please send to talk. We'd love to hear about it, especially from any local companies. If you're anywhere in Canada, it doesn't have to be any one of the host cities. Do so. If you've made Kubernetes die in a fun way and you want to share your disaster story, that's another fun thing to hear. We're always loving to learn from others and what not to do and what to do. And if you have your phone ready, QR code for the meetup channel on Slack. So please join us there. I'll just leave this up for a couple seconds while people can take a shot of that. And okay, I'll move on. And just to follow from last week, I wish it was last week, last meetup, we had a little trivia on Kahoot, and we had three winners. So first place got a nice Kubernetes hoodie, and then the other two got a lovely little Kubernetes masks. So hopefully we'll be doing another one at a following meetup, but we do have, this is another fun way to get swag too. So do study up on your Kubernetes and CNCF trivia. And now for a more general CNCF community update. Kubecon EU recordings are live. They're over 300, so soon you will be able to look like this guy trying to explain all the cool things that you learned at Kubecon. Hopefully by the next meetup, we'll have some more statistics on the attendees for Kubecon EU, and we'll also be probably doing a little bit of a preview for Kubecon North America, being that is now open for registration. We don't have the I can't remember when the talks are going to be announced, but I would imagine in the next probably month or so. And also this quarter, we had a new CNCF radar. This time it was focused on observability. If you remember, the last one was focused on, what was it, delivery, GitOps? I can't remember now. So just as an overview for what a tech radar is, the CNCF polls its user community to see which tools that you should be adopting or trialing or assessing. So each radar is going to have a theme, and generally you're going to be looking at every quarter. And so this time it was the votes came from 32 companies across the board. So we have a varying sizes here for the companies, so you can see the biggest. So you've got some pretty big ones, across different industries. And then they voted for observability on this time. So you can see here that you have a lot of, last time you just had Helm and Flux in the adopt category. This time you have Elastic, Prometheus, OpenMetrics, Datadog, and Grafana. So you can see there's a lot more tools within this landscape and a lot more ready for people to start using, as well as a fair amount for trial. So I don't know what the next one will be, but this is seeming to be a pretty interesting metric for what tools are being used amongst the CNCF end user community. And the next up, graduations from the CNCF. We had 2, I believe, since last time. So TIC-V has now graduated projects, as is Harbor, which is pretty exciting. So congrats to all the members of those 2 communities. And then we also had a few new CNCF projects join as incubating. We have K3s, which is Rancher's Edge Kubernetes Distribution, Dex as a former Core OS tool for identity management, and then Crossplane, which is infrastructure management. So you can define different cloud providers as YAML, so you can deploy things to GCP, Azure, Amazon, all through Kubernetes CRDs, which is a pretty cool tool. And then Kubernetes 1.19 was released. This was happened a few weeks back. So this was a code name for this one was Accentuate The Paw-sitive. Big fan of the logo on this. So if any of you are familiar with Animal Crossing, you can clearly see that a lot of the core members were influenced by that. Some of the big numbers from this one, we had 34 enhancements in, 10 enhancements moving to stable. Ingress is now finally GA, which is pretty cool. They've also moved support window to 1 year. And for those who are more security minded, SecComp moved up to GA as well. And Duffy Cooley did a really good Kubecon talk on that. So if you're looking to get a little bit more acquainted with that, do go check that out. And then some of the other, there's another SIG project for the SecComp operator that was headed up by, I believe, Sasha Grenert, which is another fun tool. And so that's it for the update. So now for our speakers, is George around, or are we going right to Baruch?
George is here, but he's on mute.
He's on mute. All right. So whenever you're ready to go, George, just feel free to share, and really looking forward to hearing the talk.
Yes, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear on my end.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And hey, I decided to wear my, I don't know if you can see this clearly or not, but my Hockey Hall of Fame hat. It is getting quite worn, but you know, I'm, of course, watching all of the playoffs, and my team, the Avalanche, I'm based here in Denver, were eliminated by the Stars, so at least I couldn't, not participating in this year. But anyway, just a call to you folks in Canada that love hockey. So let me go ahead and get started here. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay. Let's see here.
I think, Chris, you need to unshare first.
Good point. Thanks, Bruce.
Zoom is hard.
Yeah, it is. It is. Let me, let's do this.
Yeah, between Meet, Zoom, and Teams, I forget which is which.
Perfect. So thanks for the introduction. My name is George Kobar. I'm a community advocate for Elastic, and in this session, we were talking with some of the cloud ops folks, and what would be kind of a cool talk to talk about. And I thought, hey, maybe we talk about observability within the space of Kubernetes. And it's funny because when I think about this talk, I really like to get more into the weeds. So hopefully if I come to speak again, I'll be able to get a lot more technical. This tends to be a little bit more on the theoretical, on the high level side. Hopefully I can try to have some time at the end of this to kind of dive down a little bit more than I'm used to. But, by all means, if anyone has any comments or questions, feel free to ask away, either in chat or just to speak up. I think that's, I kind of like to have the feeling of a meetup, or I miss the aspect of meetups where we could just be in person, maybe having pizza or a beer or anything else. I miss that interaction dearly. So, maybe to try to replicate that. If you have any questions, by all means, let me know. So about, let's see here, 10, 15 years ago, I used to administer an Exchange environment and a Bez server. And for better or for worse, you can either feel sorry for me, or maybe that's kind of how I started my career. Anytime we had applications that, anytime an executive at the company I was at was getting slow email, I would get paged out in the middle of the night, and I would kind of crawl to my computer and open up an RDP session, or if I couldn't get to it, it'd be some type of remote KVM or DRAC, and open up, Task Manager, look at events and logs, and really try to figure out what's going on. And on the Linux side, obviously tail-f was my friend and top, and really trying to understand what was going on. And we know with the application architecture of today with microservices, that's not really scalable. And there's kind of a cool little picture from Uber. I think that might have been reused multiple times. I was going to put the AWS one, but hey, Uber is pretty cool. But the treating the monolithic applications by just opening up a terminal in this type of scale architecture is not scalable, if not near impossible to do. So, and it's funny, as actually, I actually grabbed this from a JFrog presentation. It was at Kubecon with Chris Short, and he was talking about sysdig in 2019. So just to call out to you folks at JFrog. But one of the things that makes this a lot more difficult to troubleshoot is the container lifespan. About 40% of containers are, have the lifespan of less than 5 minutes. Now, then again, I mean, a lot of these containers could be just tests or spin ups or whatever, but I mean, 40% is a substantial amount for under 5 minutes. So when you're trying to troubleshoot these intrinsic performance related issues that are intermittent, it just becomes a lot more difficult. And when you have maybe some folks that, hey, let's just redeploy, that might be a good solution that we could do in the middle of the night, just to, hey, I can go back to bed and hopefully this will help out. We lose a lot of that data that's historical or forensic data of really what happened. And again, this is, I say this more tongue in cheek, right? This is me looking through, gobs of, 7 gigs worth of data, maybe syslog data. If you're setting this data into, let's say, a data lake or a central repository, this happens to be just a search problem, right? It's how, if I'm being paged or called, or there's an issue that's, critical to the business, I'm now on the hot seat to really try to figure out what's going on. Really, what is the problem is really the question you're trying to answer. This just becomes a search problem. And not to be a marketing-ish person, but Elastic is a search company. Now I'll go a little bit more into the details of our the stack itself. But Elasticsearch is a search engine. If you're, more times than not, if you look at your an application and it has a search bar in it, more likely it's Elasticsearch that's running behind the scenes. And there's a lot of different use cases from an open source perspective that a lot of people are using our software for, for search or for observability or even for security. And that's kind of where we see a lot of the community today really building those solutions on top of this search engine. Now, when I kind of go into the Kubernetes documentation, when, I say, go back, a few years when I was starting to learn more about Kubernetes or Mesosphere, kind of getting my lay of the land of where, this architectures are coming from. I kind of saw this slide with the documentation where, there is, Kubernetes is kind of unopinionated in terms of the technology of what that logging backend is, what solutions that you have. Right. And of course, hey, just as that meme that you saw before, obviously there's a large landscape. And if we kind of narrow that down, really the observability analysis is really just the upper right-hand corner. So there's a lot of different technologies, some graduated projects, as well as, paid or open source projects that you can choose from. And my head's kind of covering that little piece there, but just imagine the whole view. And hot off the press, as a few months ago, you could see that there's a lot of other, technologies for you to assess, trial, and adopt. And I literally just got that in a few seconds ago from your presentation. So there's a lot of different things that you could choose from. But the industry really just has kind of landed on, you really should have these 3 quote unquote pillars of observability, which is really getting information about the application tracing metrics or logs. And I think that's kind of what decides that observability framework. I think it's more than just that, though, and I'll go a little bit into that a little bit more. So, we're kind of assigning maybe some technologies where we talk about Jaeger and Prometheus. So Jaeger for your tracing, Prometheus for metrics, FluentD for your logs, and be able to visualize that data, let's say through Kibana or Grafana. But one of the things that I personally see, and hopefully it's something that maybe you will agree, and would love to hear if you disagree, but these are still different tools, different UIs, and different teams that could potentially be using these these tools. If you're still kind of looking at this from a search problem, if I want to get more information about my traces, but then I have to go and jump into another user interface for my metrics, and there may be one team, let's say the application development team, that's really looking at traces, and there's no visibility from the DevOps or operation crew that's looking at it from a metrics or infrastructure perspective. So this is still a search problem. And one thing, obviously, that I'm a little more opinion-based, coming from Elastic, but you can grab all this data, Jaeger, Prometheus, FluentD, and put it into a single data source like Elasticsearch and visualize that data. But this is still not necessarily a great use case. Well, it's better. It's not exactly what I would consider to be like full observability and a great package piece, because you still have, a single window for, let's say, your traces, your metrics, and your logging pieces. And what you really need, I think, is kind of what we call as this Observa-BLT. Now, this is the only trick I could do in PowerPoint, so I'll hold your applause for later. But this is concept of this elastic schema. And this is an open source project through Elasticsearch. And really what this elastic schema is, it's nothing really new. We kind of borrowed this from Star Trek, that we wanted a universal translator. No matter from what type of data source that you're bringing the data into, whether it be metric-based time series data, APM trace data, we wanted to have a common framework, a common language that you can ingest that data into Elasticsearch or whatever tools that you like. That common schema, provides that foundation of how can I correlate these different pieces of data together in one stream. And that's kind of what we call that Observa-BLT, is really the pieces of the three pillars. Again, it's not just those three pillars, but it's also the common schema. And hopefully I can kind of show you and maybe convince you that I think having some type of common framework or that schema in place really should be a part of that, your observability strategy. So if we take a look at this simple log message here, just from, I think this is a Apache web server. But if we look at this log message and we apply this type of universal translator or this common schema, we could look at, hey, we're applying these generally accepted field names for this log message, like timestamp, the event, what's the original data, the HTTP version, and so forth. So when you're ingesting one type of web server message versus another, from Apache to another, you'll have that same type of field or schema that's going to be applied to this. If we kind of take a look at, let's say, from logs to metrics and looking at maybe some Kubernetes data, we can see that commonality. In logs, there's a reference to a Kubernetes pod UID that we're going to apply to our schema, and vice versa, we're going to see that same UID with the metrics. So if we're troubleshooting an issue and we're looking, let's say, at the log messages, and there's nothing really there may be some troubling piece within the logs that say, hey, there's maybe some type of heap issue or something that's going on. Well, rather than me going off to a different tool and maybe trying to search for that, I could easily just click within that single UI to be able to get the viewpoint of the metrics for that particular pod, right? And I think a lot of that comes from that schema, having that ability from the different data sources to be able to search across that. So logs and metrics is just one of the things that are the data source types that I use. But this could be applied to events, from security events to network data to telemetry, geospatial. I mean, the list keeps going on. I mean, if you want to introduce maybe some of your observability data and and pollinate it and enrich it with maybe some of the business KPI data using that common schema, you'll have some common reference points that you can search. So that's kind of the other value on that is it's not just the observability, but it also could be around the business KPI, around the the security piece, and how you can kind of bring all those pieces of data together. And again, this is not necessarily the concept itself is having that schema or that common schema is not necessarily a security or a elastic concept, but the concept of observability, having this data and being able to correlate across that, I think is kind of one of those missing pieces there. So again, a little bit more on the marketing side, but this is, if we have that single source of truth, which is just the data, the foundation part of the Elasticsearch, and it had that single source of truth, then you can start building different dashboards for different teams, but it's the same user interface, the same tool or same UI that you're using across. So for me, if I'm sitting on the application development team, on the dev team, and I say, hey, we're getting some reports that the application's running slow. Is it the infrastructure? Is it something within the Kubernetes or the containers? Like, how can I find information? If I'm looking at my traces, I say, hey, I don't really see anything that's evident, but I'm going to go and take a quick glance at maybe, let's say, metrics or about the logs. And then I can share that dashboard with another part of the team, and say, hey, the infra team, can you take a look at this? I'm seeing, let's say, high disk IO or something that's related. That story becomes a lot more, that workflow becomes a lot more easier, and you don't have to go from team to team and different silo to silo. So I think that's kind of what really provides that observability standpoint. So this is just a quick shot of the Elastic stack, which is comprised of kind of that ingestion data layer, which I'll be talking a little bit about, and about some of the announcements that we made around beats. But that's the ingestion layer obviously is responsible for getting data into Elasticsearch. And then we have our data analytics layer, which is just the heart of the stack. It's Elasticsearch, it's the actual search engine. And then Kibana, which I'll also demo here, hopefully if I have enough time, to visualize and also kind of manage the stack. Now in 7.9, one of the things that we just released, if you're familiar with the architecture, and I'll kind of go back into this beats, this lower layer, there are the lightweight data shippers that are installed onto the endpoint, for example, onto the hosts that are providing your pods, or within any type of infrastructure, even in cloud, right? And it's responsible for shipping that data into Elasticsearch. And so beats, you'll hear like metric beat or winlog beat or file or log beat, metric beat. There's a lot of different community created beats, or even Elastic created beats. They're all open source, and you can install, use, and consume. But what we did is we decided that we wanted to roll a lot of these modules and these beats together into this one Elastic agent. So this is the thing that you would install on whatever endpoint agent. And it's responsible for just doing what the modules that you enable, like for example on metrics, shipping that metrics or logging data from the infrastructure or cloud that you're currently on. You'll get at least that base infrastructure piece. But one of the things I commonly think about in terms of observability and containers on the move or with Kubernetes is how do you locate new containers that are brought up within the system, identifying services and container IDs, and how can you still keep that visibility across multiple shifts within the architecture? Well, I mean, if you have, for example, a pod that goes down or a whole node goes down, obviously, that those containers are going to be brought up. I'd say brought up is probably a bad word, but redeployed onto other infrastructure within Kubernetes. And I think one of the things that we provide is this notion of auto discovery. It's actually not new. I mean, there's other services and other products that use that, but auto discovery helps at least Elastic and Beats identify when a container has either stopped or started. And we can grab that information if a new container has been started. Let's grab that information, like the host, the port, the container ID, the image, and some of these labels, and be able to start to ingest that new data into Elasticsearch. And the same thing with Kubernetes. It's this auto discovery. This is just configured on the Elastic agent itself, provides details over when the pod starts or stops or needs to be updated, and really exposes a lot of these metric pieces here about the container ID, the namespace, the no name, the UID, a lot of these details around the actions of bringing up, down, or updating containers. And you think all that lightweight data shipper that happens to sit or reside on that host is shipping that data off to Elasticsearch. And that's also metrics and logs, based off the kubelet, API server, schedule, and proxy. So we're kind of bringing all that data along with the infrastructure. And then one of the things that we are, kind of being forward-looking on the future side, any application happens to sit on Kubernetes, on this architecture, we're actually bringing a lot of the trace information from that. So in the future, we're going to provide traces on this one module itself. So you'll be able to integrate the Elastic Agent code into whatever application. And then, if it's written in Java or Go or Python or Node.js, I mean, these are just some examples that I put in terms of, things that we support. But that Elastic Agent would be that one thing that you install and would be able to configure for that logging, metrics, and traces. But for the future right now, or for the present right now, the APM traces that we have for Elastic is just you deploy another container that's it's called the Application Performance Server, and that ships that data directly into Elasticsearch. But then, from leveraging the beats portion of that, then that's kind of where you'll leverage that common schema. And again, the common schema is something that you could easily create yourself. It's deciding what's important to your organization to create a schema on how that data is configured. There is that saying, shit in, shit out. Excuse my vulgarity, but it's true. I mean, as you're bringing that data in, if you don't have a really good schema or strategy around how you bring that data in, then I think just makes this observability that much more difficult. And I think that's one of the decisions that Elastic has for this common schema. We're not telling you, hey, you have to use this, but hey, we're making it easier for you to bring different data sources and search across. And we think it's a great open source idea that if you want to contribute or other people, organizations want to contribute to, I think it would make our lives a lot easier. So I've got 5 minutes, or I got about 10 minutes for a demo. I'm going to try to do my best to showcase this in a short time. And to be honest, I haven't really looked at the chat. So let me try to get through 5 minutes of showcasing what this looks like, and then maybe I can spend 5 minutes doing the looking through chat. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right, please stop me if you can't see my screen. I'm gonna go that way so I can get forward. So one of the things that I'm showing here is I'm kind of skipping ahead on the workflow. We have integrations to, let's say, Slack, and we received a notification from this application it's called Hipster. It's a web application that sells a lot of hipster products such as old typewriters, cameras, and so forth. But this is the application that's actually supporting this. And this is definitely a heterogeneous environment, which you'll probably see today. A lot of different services, a lot of components that are comprised, like in Java or Go on the front end. But we received an alert based off of we're seeing transactions a lot higher than expected. And one thing I can kind of go into is go directly into some of the traces or that service details. So I can look at the spans and the transaction history and so forth. But I think for the purpose of this demo of really just showing the UI is that how we're using that common schema, behind the scenes, and really kind of stringing this data together for us to be able to jump through one pod, one container, and really kind of diving down on this, right? So, I mean, if we select on one of the transactions like product handler, we can get this nice distribution of how long it takes for transactions. But one thing you could easily do, and I'm going to move this out of the way here. Under actions, let's say we wanted to go, we see one error off the top of this alert here in about 580 requests, but it took about 1,000 to 1,000 milliseconds. We can see most of the transactions take a lot less. But right from here, I can start looking at details about this particular transaction. I'm kind of skipping ahead, but let's say if I wanted to take a look at the pod metrics for this Kubernetes cluster, what it's doing is it knows that the service that's the front end service resides on these containers. And that's the label that we provided within the schema. And then now we have some of the metrics we're able to see. For example, these are the metrics for this particular front end pod, which happens to sit in this. But if I wanted to go back and let's say, I don't see anything out of the ordinary for the pod metrics, maybe I want to take a look at specific container logs. So it's going to look at the logging, what containers are a part of this pod, and then go directly onto those logs. So again, I'm kind of jumping through different user interfaces, the same, solution, the same, the data is the single source of truth, but going through these different pieces so I can kind of do this workflow of investigation. And here, this is just, logs on this particular container ID, which happens to be here. I'll have a more of a holistic view so you can kind of get a better idea on that looks like. And if we want to do like a live stream, like a tail-f, we could do that. I accidentally shut this down, so that was my fault. Kudos to doing a live demo, right? But let's go ahead and go back to, we're seeing logs and the traces and metrics. But if I want to go back to, let's say, like more of a holistic view of what this would look like, I can pull up, let's see here, like, metrics from a dashboard. And now I'm gonna be able to see, like, if I just want to be, I'm just the infrastructure person and I'm really just looking at the memory, CPU, disk, metrics. And I want to really look at this from, multiple vantage points. If I want to look at it from like either hosts, or if I want to look at just Kubernetes pods, and if I want to look at that just specifically to Docker containers, we can kind of have that granularity. And if I'm looking at, this API worker looks like that's a little higher CPU to the normal, then I can start to dive down directly into it and look at some of the traces that are off that container and so forth. So again, I know I really rushed the part of this demonstration. And again, most of the message here is really around having that common framework, that single point of tying all this data together is very powerful. So while you use Elastic or not, I think having that schema is really beneficial. And I think that's something for you to consider. So with that, I think I'm done with the demo as much as I could get in 5 minutes. I wanted to see if there's anyone else that had some questions or thoughts. I would love to talk with you folks on that. And I'll try to, if there's nothing that it's coming through here, then I'll see if I can go through chat as well.
Yeah, so thanks for the great talk, George. Yeah, please submit your questions in Q&A. While we get questions coming in, I'll ask a question, George. Is there any log and trace correlation? Like if I wanted to say there's a trace, show me all the associated logs with that specific trace. Is that something that's available? Yeah,
so there is. And if you, actually, I'll go back to that. I'll share my screen again here. Actually, am I still sharing?
You are not.
Yeah, let me try to beat Zoom here. So yeah, let's for example go over to the traces. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into our application performance monitoring, and these are just some of the services that we're monitoring. And I think the one thing that I went to is either the average service or it was the front end. So I'll go ahead and go into this. But if I want to go into a specific transactions that's listed here, I can pull up that particular transaction. And then right here, I can go to the actions and I can actually look at the trace logs. So then I can go directly right here and grab the logs for that traces. What's also cool is I'll go back. If I wanted to go into OpenEdition and GitHub, there's also, if we're actually looking at the trace a little bit more, actually, let me see if I can fold this real quick. See if this will actually provide me what I want. If I look at the sample document, it'll give me, exactly the raw data that I'm actually getting from the traces. So if I really wanted to dive a little bit more details about transaction, this is just kind of a good way of looking at that common schema on that field mapping that we have. So the mapping, the field name to the actual value here. But then you can also, I know it integrates some of the code. So if it recognizes there's an error message, let's see if I can show that real quick. Let's go to, I think it was like, let me think about this. I think it was like the 800. If there was a particular error message, I could go back and find an error here. It actually can show the piece of the code that was actually a part of. So what's also great is if you could take that code and then submit it to, if I'm not a part of the development team, and say, hey, I find that there's a couple of errors within the traces within this piece. Is it something you can investigate? So you can actually get more of a pinpoint focus on the traces other than just the logs.
Right. Saves a little bit of time, kind of narrows it down a little bit.
Yeah, and when it comes down to time to resolve or mean to resolve, I think that's kind of the name of the game, is really just having this capability to really have that workflow and really minimize the impact, or really try to find the solution to a problem.
Right. Okay, 2 questions here. I'll take the first one from Matthew. Question is, if we're currently using FluentD to collect logs from our pods, is there an easy way to enable Elastic Common Schema with it?
Yeah, so if it depends on how you're bringing that data into Elasticsearch. Like if you're, so there's a architecture concept called ingest. It's an ingest node. So it's an open source, free to use node type in Elasticsearch that allows you to create what's called an ingest pipeline. And that pipeline is kind of where you can then define where that schema is at. So you can define that on the Elasticsearch side. And if, let's say, you're using Beats to bring some of that FluentD data into Elasticsearch, you can also configure it there. So there's a lot of different places where you can automatically use the common schema. I know Beats it's right out of the project. So it's something that we're working really hard to just have that. So yes, if you're using FluentD today, you can start to use some of that the schema either through the ingest node or on the Beats side.
All right, another one coming in here. This is from Rakesh. I guess in summary, like if you had to TLDR, like what's a quick way to call Elastic Common Schema? And a follow-up question is it a proprietary or is it standardized by CNCF? And if an example maybe to go through is like, if I have AWS CloudWatch logs or GCP logs, can I bring those all in too?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think it's, the TLDR for this is, think of Star Trek and it's the universal translator. I think that's kind of the best. If you're not really familiar with Star Trek and the universal translator, it's this device that was in science fiction. That's the concept of it, no matter what language, alien or human, that someone's speaking, you'll hear just the language that you're native to, that you'll hear it. If you think about the common schema, a lot of different data sources, different things that you want to collect data on, have different logs, have different formats in its message, either message logs or traces or whatever. But finding that common language to tell Elasticsearch or to tell whatever system you're using helps kind of correlate that data together. Having a common language to really bring that data together, I think is really important. And it's an open source project. I don't think it's officially being sanctioned by the CNCF. It's something where if the CNCF wants to contribute to, or as an individual contributor, you can do that, or organizations are. It's just I think it kind of benefits Elastic users just because it gives you that common framework to be able to enrich and search across multiple data sources.
Right on. Okay, so we are at 4:45. So if you do have any more questions for George, please, George, I think you're watching the chat, so just feel free to message George for more questions. But just to keep things moving along, Baruch, I believe the floor is yours. Baruch, if you're saying stuff, you may be muted.
Yes, I am muted. And now I share my screen, the right screen, and I'm unmuted. And so Archie is a smart man. He learns from experience. Once he organized the conference and brought me for a 20 minutes talk that lasted for an hour, screwed up the next speaker and the entire schedule. So now he knows to schedule me last. Unless you have better stuff to do, buckle up, because we have 126 slides to go over. I hope you're not in a hurry, but I'll do my best to fit it into some reasonable time frame. So we're going to talk about influencing DevOps without authority. How DevOps engineer, in quotes, might help. We're going to unpack all that during our talk. And let me start with the story. This is Alex. And Alex works as a system administrator in a pretty low-tech company, something to do with textile and everything. And Alex had a problem. And, you know, this looks very familiar. Your silos that you try to solve with DevOps, you have your dev team, you have your ops team, and then you throw the grenade of the code from one to another. Pretty standard stuff for a lot of us. And where is my mouse? Here we go. Alex goes online and tries to figure out how this problem can be solved. And one of the things he read about is DevOps, right? Bringing silos in software engineering workspace. He's obviously excited. He started to research what it means to do DevOps. And one of the things they spot very, very early is actually that, hey, it actually pays much better to be a DevOps engineer than to be a system administrator. So obviously it looks like a great win-win. It looks like they both it solved their problem and they can earn more money. So obviously next thing Alex do is becoming a DevOps engineer in another low-tech company. This time is also like a textile industry. So it's about time to start doing DevOps things like installing Jenkins on a desktop computer or implementing DevOps in their DevOps environment. And for some reason, it doesn't work. For some reason, it doesn't solve the problem of the silos. It doesn't solve the problem of the code being thrown on them and then explode as a grenade. So then Alex started to think, and the idea that occurs to Alex is that they need collaboration between dev and DevOps. So there is dev and there is like DevOps engineers, and they need to collaborate. And then he thinks like, I'm going to come with a new term, DevOps. DevOps is the collaboration between dev and DevOps. That's pretty cool. And there is probably some money in it as well. But you know what, jokes aside, Alex actually did some reading about DevOps. And then this is where Alex realizes that, you know, DevOps is not about DevOps engineers. DevOps is not about having DevOps department. It's actually about practices and methodology and culture. And obviously some basic reading, the Phoenix Project, the DevOps Handbook, the Accelerate. And this is where Alex kind of realizes that DevOps is actually having all those great people with their deep specialization, but also having common goals, common culture. And obviously from the book Accelerator by itself, Alex discovers that there is this great document, there is great research called the State of DevOps Report, and he looks into that, and then he actually tries to see what it means to do DevOps. Well, for example, they figure out that their organization is among the low performers. They release very rarely, and the lead time for changes is huge. The time to restore service is very long, and they have a very significant change failure rate. And then Alex looks at the trends, and the trends actually show that, yes, the industry moves towards DevOps, and you can see how the 7% of the elite performers only a year ago in 2018, the previous report, actually becomes 20% in the 2019 report. That means like 3 times the growth of the elite performers. And then Alex tries to figure out why that happens, and the clear reasons for that are kind of obvious to Alex as well. So first of all, there are users, and users want features, and obviously users want features yesterday. And how DevOps helps? Well, obviously releasing faster helps bringing features faster to the market and beat their competition. Another reason is security and security breaches. And again, DevOps here is very clearly a part of this way to be more secure, and that's identify that you have a problem, fix it, and then deploy or update as fast as possible. And the deploy as fast as possible is again thanks to DevOps transformation. So this all is kind of clear, and it's absolutely natural that companies want to do DevOps better, and that's part of the evolutionary pressure that every organization faces. All good. Alex feels confident. They manage to get themselves into really important conversations up there in the management floor, and they hear the reasonable question: how do we release faster? And it's reasonable because we just spoke. Everybody wants to do DevOps for obvious reasons. And the answers that Alex used to hear are, let's hire more DevOps engineers, or let's fire all the testers. And if you wonder how firing all the testers can help you release faster, well, you just release faster. You don't test anymore. But obviously those are ridiculous answers. But the thing is, when Alex tries to preach for the right way of doing it, to implement actual DevOps, well, it doesn't go so well. One of the reasons why it doesn't go so well is because of the organizational structure. So methodology and culture and the related decisions are taken on a very high level of this organizational structure. When Alex, an individual contributor, just, you know, they were a DevOps engineer or a system architect or whatever, just now, actually need to influence that because they know it's the right thing. And this talk is about Alex finding the way to do it, and I'm going to share with you how it can be done. So, as Julia mentioned, my name is Baruch. We can omit the last name, and I'm a chief head of DevOps advocacy in a company called JFrog. We might heard about us. We do cool DevOps tools. Like we have the entire platform that helps you move faster in this DevOps evolutionary pressure and actually release faster for providing more features, being more secure, and everything that we spoke about. The most important part of this slide is my Twitter handle, @jbaruch, so you can follow me on Twitter and continue the conversation there. This is my California, remember we spoke about San Francisco Bay Area, that's my California disclaimer. You can see here that the most emotionally expressive and confrontational people are from Israel and Russia. I managed to be from both, so if I offend you during this talk, or this talk runs longer than you expected, don't expect any apology from me. The most important slide of this talk is this. If you go to jeffrog.com/show notes, you can go there now or later, you will find the slides uploaded already there. You will find the video because this talk is recorded. I will ask the orgs to send me the video to upload it there. You'll find all the links, including the previous chart. I took it from an amazing book called The Culture Map, but also the State of DevOps report and everything else we're going to talk about. You'll find them there, the place to comment, to rate, and a very nice raffle. Thanking you for being here. I'm going to talk about the raffle later and tell you what it is. So let's start with our talk. So I mentioned how I'm from Russia in a certain period of my life, and you know, the leader of the software in Russia had a lot of bullshit to say, but also one reasonable claim: learn, learn, and learn. It means that learning never stops, and obviously to implement DevOps in your organization, to influence for DevOps in your organization, you have some learning to do. You need to know the basics, and we already mentioned obviously the Phoenix project and the DevOps handbook, and the Accelerate book, but there are others like the basics of SRE in the site reliability engineering, and the Liquid Software book about continuous updates that I had the honor to co-author with two of co-founders of JFrog, and The War, Peace, and IT. The War, Peace, and IT is a very interesting book written by Mark Schwartz, who I'm a big fan of. And this book is for managers to understand why DevOps is important. And there is a say, read the books that your managers read, I think there is a lot of smartness in this saying, because then you will know what they're thinking. And War, Peace, and IT is one of those books. Highly recommended. If you are not into reading, or you already read all that, there is more. There are newsletters and podcasts. There is a great podcast and newsletter that's called DevOps-ish. There is a podcast called the DevOps Speakeasy podcast that I'm co-hosting. So there are quite a lot of bit there over there. And there are tons of recording from different meetups. This amazing group have amazing talks that you want to watch the recording. And there is a technology radar. I mean, I just learned about the CNCF technology radar, so I'm definitely going to replace this screenshot with the CNCF technology radar as being much more relevant to our conversation, or just add it. But yeah, that's another piece. So, but you know what? You all know all the things. You know what DevOps is. You have your background all set up. You are like this Rhino is all ready to deliver the real message of real DevOps. And then you go to your manager and you explain all that, how DevOps is a methodology and practices and culture. And they go like, nope, not going to happen. And the reasons might be plentiful, and the ways that they express this don't like that can be plentiful. Here are just a couple of examples, right? They can just be overloaded and they won't listen because they have other stuff to do. They can be distracted and they really want to do that, but there are tons of other stuff that they need to know. There might be that they will talk a lot and, do all the right noises. Yes, it makes sense. Here are more and more meetings about that and nothing happens. And it's not necessarily because people are evil, don't want to do the right thing, or just hate you personally. It's because there is some activation energy that needs to be put into that in order to put things in motion. And all those will prompt you to give up. Because, no one wants to deal with it. Why are you the person who cares more than everybody else? And you really might want to give up, but don't. We have Winston Churchill that calls us never to give in, and we agree. But on the other side, also don't try to boil the ocean. Probably the first attempts you will make won't succeed immediately. So you need to be ready for the long haul. And what I want to suggest is actually doing something that not just trying to convince random people, but actually going by using a methodology. There are a lot of methodologies of influencing other people. The one that I wanted to suggest to you today, called Influence Without Authority by Alan Cohen and David Bradford. That's a very, very old book, and it's a very old framework, but it's still great. Here it is. It's 6-step framework that we're going to go step by step and apply it for convincing other people for implementing DevOps. The first step is assume that all are potential allies. So it sounds trivial, but you know what? We don't think about people that way. If you think about your colleagues, if you think about your bosses, their bosses, other teams' managers, you might think, well, they won't even listen to me, and they will probably against it. And all those assumptions actually prevent you from even trying influencing those people, and this is a bad thing to do. We really need to assume that everybody are allies. And the next question is, well, okay, now I have tons of them. With whom do I start? How do I select the most potential ones to be influenced? And there are a couple of tricks that I can suggest here too. So first of all, forward-looking teams. The teams that are more open to change, that are more open for the new and for the right thing to do, are the teams that either already embracing DevOps as it should be embraced. After all, it's a 10 years old methodology. There are teams that are doing it right, or they will be more open to what you suggest. Another important aspect of a very good potential ally are highly visible projects. Obviously, if you succeed with them, your success will be visible across the organization and obviously will be much more powerful. But not everybody are playing fair. There are self-promoting cheaters, and douchebags. You need to beware of those. And the question is, how do you even know which team are which, who are visible, who are forward-looking, and who are self-promoting cheaters? Well, there is no better way to actually talk to people and listen to people and try to figure out who is who. So that was our first step. We really need to remove those blinders of, well, I don't believe those people will ever help me, and assume that everybody are your friends. And then you need to pick the right allies who have the most impact, that if you manage to convince them. The next one is understanding why are you doing what you are doing. And this is very important to understand first about yourself, because that will clarify how you go forward. So obviously the obvious answer is, I'm trying to influence my organization to adopt DevOps because it will make my life easier. And that's how DevOps started. It started with a bunch of ops folks like Jess Humble and John Willis and Patrick Dubois and Jim Kim, that they had a pain and they wanted to fix it. This is how it started, and that can be your motivation as well. I want to fix what's wrong. It's also, you realize, and that's fine, that that's the right thing to do for your organization. We spoke about evolutionary pressure, and you see, and you understand that the companies that want to embrace DevOps will go down. You don't want that for your organization. That's a perfect motivation as well. You know what? Sometimes you just want to work in the forward-looking company, organization, or team. You want to feel good about what you are doing. That's a great motivation. And let's not forget a very basic, but also a completely reasonable motivation. That's your resume, your career path. If you implement real DevOps, that's a great career achievement for you going forward. Now, after you answered the question, why are you doing it? The next question will be, well, the people that I'm trying to convince, to influence, what is their world? What they think about, what's important for them, and what motivates them. So let's start where we left off ourselves, and let's admit that other people care about their careers as well. And this is fine. They want the same thing. And if you manage to convince them that terraforming an organization to DevOps is an achievement that they can share and they can take ownership and pride in, that's a great motivation for them as well. To understand people's motivations, there are great resources. And as you noticed, I recommended tons of books, but I just got started. Here are some more. So one of the most important books about people's motivation is Daniel's Pink Drive. And I bet you heard about this book, if not read it. And it's very, very important to actually go ahead and read it. And the 3 factors that motivate people, according to Daniel Pink and other researchers that he refers to, are autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So when we're going to convince other people, we need to try and make sure that all 3 of those will be satisfied more if they adopt, excuse me, real DevOps than to what they do today. And generally, in order to work with people, you need to understand how that system works. And obviously, that system is very different from machines, both because you really can hardly predict how they operate, and the feedback loop sucks. But there are some researchers that can help you understand how people will react to what you try to do with them better. And they're all behavioral psychology in the end of the day, stuff like predictable rational by Dana Ariely and Sway. How can you implement people by using their irrational behavior by Ori and Ron Brafman. And they all, in the end of the day, push you in one direction. You need to make sure that people are satisfied with their legacy. DevOps is a great legacy, and let's talk about that, and let's talk about the world of other person. What other people might care about, and how you, when you try and influence them for DevOps, can satisfy their needs. So first of all, how are they measured? How are they judged? What are their KPIs or whatever? Definitely should be taken into consideration when you build a strategy of how you go to talk about them. Also, how their boss will react to what they are doing. Will they be supportive or not? How, if what you even present is interesting to them, if it's something that they care about. How about their career? Will they be promoted or not? How about reaction from the colleagues? How about their daily work? And you know what? How about their attitude? Are they even people that care about others and want to help on them or not? And you know what? What's going on outside their work? Maybe they cannot even accommodate whatever they want to accommodate just because it's impossible. And when we look for how they are measured and what's important for them, here's a great example. Remember the State of DevOps report? Here are DevOps metrics. And if we can convince people that we can improve those metrics, it means that we will move our organization from being a low performers to be an elite performers. And remember, this is where the legacy, the fame, all the positive feedback is. Where can you look for clues on what they are measured and how can you take advantage? So where can you look for clues? For example, OKRs. There are a lot of organizations that have the OKRs publicly available. And if you can look at the OKRs of other people, what they're measured upon, that can give you ideas on how can you go about them. You can look at the backlog information, for example, to see what the goals are. Different types of presentations, sales, business kickoffs, tons of different organizational presentations that will tell you what people are busy and what they're talking about and what they care about. And obviously nothing replaces just, water cooler talk and socializing with people and trying to learn what they care about. And after you kind of know where to look for it, it's very easy then to organize the diagnostics that you do. And that's an example of a table that you can run for diagnosing the world of other person in your organization by teams. And I will give you a couple of examples just to show you how to go about it. So here is an example: developers. And we spoke about autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and we are going to also talk about fears. So autonomy of developers. What developers want in order to be autonomous in their work? They want to deliver software to the end users without the need of other teams to deploy it, massage it, make it available, etc., etc. They want to write code and then the users should use it. How they can achieve it? With DevOps. So here how DevOps helps developers' autonomy. Let's take another example, the fears of developers. When they think about DevOps, what the developers fear of? Obviously, they fear of more work they need to do, more stuff they need to learn. So the developers say, you know what? It's not our job to deploy the software. We have sysadmins for that. I don't want to know your Kubernetes. I don't care about all this stuff. You do that, not our work. How can we overcome it when we convince for DevOps? Obviously, the right stuff, the autonomy is one of them. What else? Let's take, for example, ops. What is the mastery of ops people? Obviously, all the sysadmins of yesterday want to master the new tools. They want to learn Kubernetes, they want to learn containers, they want to learn meshes, all the cool stuff. So we can say, you know what, DevOps cannot be built without autonomous pipeline, and all those tools are actually helping you. This is why you want DevOps. And what are their fears? Their fears are obviously being blamed for production outages. We will give access to all the devs to our production environment, and they're going to run it right to the ground, and then the boss will come after me. Why that actually happens? And again, you explain how in real DevOps that's not going to happen. Let's talk about testers. What is the autonomy of testers? Well, they want to test things. They want to have environments which are mimicking the production environments. They want to have tools for destructive testing and all this kind of stuff. And again, DevOps can help them achieve that, and that's great. I don't think we ever spoke about purpose. So let's take an example, purpose of testers. What are the purpose of being a QA person? There is only one thing that matters, the production quality. And if the production quality is the only thing that matters, we need to look at the entire picture from development all the way to production, all of it. And that means we need DevOps. A couple of more examples. Information security, autonomy. They want to make impact. They want to make our application more secure. Can DevOps do that? Of course, DevSecOps. What is their fear? Being blamed for security issues. Well, we gave developers access to production and now they deployed another Equifax for it. How can it be solved? With DevOps. Again, and we explain how we go about it. Last example of the last kind of persona, product managers. The purpose of product managers is to come up with successful feature, with successful product. How can they know that the product is successful? By letting people use it. How can that help? How can that happen more frequently? Well, DevOps allow them to experiment more. And this is their mastery. This is what they want to do in order to be successful. And of course, DevOps is here to help. And you look at that and you look at me explaining and you can go like, oh, but it doesn't make sense. I don't know the world of everybody. I cannot be the expert in delivery and security and architecture and quality and customer. It's just impossible. And I agree with you. It is as impossible as unicorn farting rainbows. The good news are you don't really need to be an expert in everything. All you need to be is what is called a T-shaped person. When you actually still a pro in whatever you do. If you're an ops person, you're great in all this stuff, Kubernetes and what's not, but you understand the world of other person. You made it your job to understand what's important for them, autonomy, mastery, purpose, and what are their fears. And this is how you can speak with them and sway them towards DevOps. There is a great book about the importance of generalists, of being the T-shaped person. It's called Range, and I really wish you would read this book. And I told you there are a lot of books. I don't think we haven't done yet with the books. So this is how you diagnose the world of other person. It's a lot of work, completely worth it, even if you are not on the journey of influencing, but just knowing your colleagues better will allow you to be better at your job. Next step, identify relevant currencies, theirs and yours. When we talk about currencies, we are not talking about money. We are actually talking about different types of things that are important from different people. Currencies can be inspiration related. Whoa, this is so cool, I want to do it. It can be task related. Well, you need to do it anyway, it's your job. It cannot be position related. Well, that will help you advance your career. It can be relationship related. You are my friend, can you please do that? And it can be person related. It will be, this is something that you would like to do because this is who you are. And the best type of currencies are when you have this type of metamorphosis, like the LB sharks and the remora fish, when they go together and do stuff because it's beneficial for both. And I will give you just one example of such currency, and that's organizing a hackathon. And you can say, how organizing a hackathon can actually help me promote DevOps in my organization? And if you just think creatively, you will realize how hackathon is, you know what? Almost every possible currency. It's inspirational because you created something really great. It's task related because you helped someone and create tool that is good for their job. It's position related because if hackathon is so amazing, people can get promoted thanks to implementing useful things. It's relationship related. It creates a great bond. So every type of currency, and all you did is just organize the hackathon. And you know what? You created currency for yourself to use later. You created a tool, for example, that someone else needed. And you also showed a great example of how DevOps can work. Here are empowered teams of T-shaped people that produced value in under 2 days. If we just scale it to the entire organization, how much more productive can our organization be? So that's kind of the type of currencies you look to create or to find. Next step, before we actually go ahead and start trading with those currencies, is dealing with relationship. And you know what? People are hard. People don't always get along. And the only way to get along with people is to know how people work. And I already mentioned a couple of those books, and here are a couple of more on human psychology, Who's Got Your Back, Super Connector, Never Eat Alone. All those are about building relationships. The less douchebag you will be to other people, the more people will like you more, the more chances that you will have they will do what you need. And that's taking the right steps toward DevOps. So there are a lot of literature over there of how to actually build great relationship, and this is what you need. So once you have the currencies and once you have good relationships with the people, now you actually influence. And the influence is give and take. There is nothing else. It's just good old quid pro quo. It has some negative connotations, especially in politics, but if we use it as it was intended, if we provide value for other people when they provide value to us, it's actually great, and it's a perfect win-win. And those exchanges come in different ways. So for example, there is an interest alignment. I will do something that we're both interested in that. And that goes to, remember, we diagnose what's important for them. And if we can convince the InfoSec people that DevSecOps is good for them, that's perfect interest alignment. It can be barter. I remember how I created you a tool for easier QA during this hackathon. Now do me a favor and try to automate your tests into the DevOps pipeline. It can be favors. Owing a favor or calling it a favor are completely fine. You need to have some currencies in order to call a favor, so you will have to owe a favor first, but in the end of the day, this works as well. And it looks like that is all. We went through the entire model. You understand how influence other people, and then you go ahead and you try it, and you still get the same result. You still get like, nope, not gonna do it. And let's talk the last part of my talk about working with objections. So there might be a couple of problems to begin with going in with the model that I showed you. And there are two types of barriers for influencing, external and internal. External barriers are just power differentiator. If the difference, remember the first slide, between when you are and when who you try to influence is too high, they just won't listen to you because you're no one and you have zero influencing powers with them. So you need to go step by step and climb up the ladder before kicking the door of your CEO and trying to convince them adopt DevOps. Different goals. You know what? It might be that the head of system administrators truly believe that DevOps is going to automate them out of their job. And his goal is not to get people fired. And he sees that as a conflict of interest. You need to work with that. Incompatible measures. Maybe some organization just measured so backwards that DevOps won't improve their numbers, but actually reduce them. And I bet you can think about tons of examples for that. Or, you know what, just plain old rivalry. I mean, people are being people. Another sort of barriers are internal. And this is basically why you suck in this model. And that could be lack of experience. You heard Baruch talking about six-stage model. Next thing you do, you take it up with your CEO to CEO to implement DevOps. You'd better try and get some experience with the model. Blinding attitude, we spoke about that. Well, it's not gonna work. They will never gonna help me. Those people won't do it with me and all this kind of stuff. Don't do that. Fear of failing. This is just upfront. Well, that will never gonna work. I won't even try and do it. And fear of reaction. What happens if I try it and I fail? Can I go back and do my job, or will it be repercussions, etc.? For this last one, there is a very, very simple way to deal, and it's called BETNA, Best Alternative to Negotiated Agreement. And this, knowing exactly what will happen if what you try to come up with fails. The worst BETNA is didn't think about BETNA, because then everything can happen and you are not prepared. Also not so great, actually trying to thinking that you can go back, undo the entire thing, and everybody will forget that it even happens. That will work only if your impact is minimal. And that will limit your ability or your will to influence big time, because the more you influence, the more you understand that you cannot undo what you started. You can realize that if that fails, you might have looked for another job. And this is scary. You don't want to do that. And again, you're not unleashing your entire influencing powers because you don't want to look for a new job. The best bet that you can have is have an offer in your pocket, because then you really don't give a shit. You do your best. You try as hard as you can. And if it fails, well, it failed. You have another place to go. Also, don't forget that it's a campaign. And in this campaign, there will be multiple acts. And you might think that it's better to lose an act and win a campaign, and that's the smart thing to go. Also, probably when you decide that you are going to do that, you have one shot. You started this campaign of influencing your entire organization to DevOps. You won't be able to say, well, I failed, I will try again in half a year. This is the thing. Be prepared, come with everything you have, and move that forward. And let's go through a little bit of the objections that you can actually hear and what you can do. One of the objections can be from the developers. On call is not my job. This is something that we hear a lot. I don't want to participate in your DevOps thing. You try to come up with more work for me. I don't want to be up at 3 a.m. That's your job. And for that, well, we have a great answer, and that's another presentation. It's called DevOps for Developers on Maybe Against Them. You can find it on YouTube or at jeffrey.com's show notes. And I go in depth for another 130 slides about how developers actually do care about DevOps and how to explain that to them. Another common objection, what's wrong with what we are doing now? Everything works. Yes, we're not DevOps, but we're not hipsterish. We're a solid organization. We don't jump on all those new things. Instead, we do good of what we do now. Well, the answer is, well, yes, but the world changes. The world changes to the point that CEO falls on his sword because of Equifax, and you remember how to retire with the immediate effects and what's not. You cannot pretend that the world around you doesn't change. Another classic one is, well, we have no time. Everybody are overloaded. We don't have time for this crap. And here, that's the answer for that. I mean, seriously, you want to do the right thing in order to have more time, and that's all. What else? Silos. Silos are good. They promote specialization, and that's very true, right? When we don't blend those silos and we don't try to be those T-shaped people, we actually can go deeper in our deep specialization. That's very true. But the problem with silos is that we actually have to optimize in the right place. And Eliyahu Goldratt, the author of the amazing book, The Goal, another book that I do recommend, said that if you don't optimize at the bottleneck, you don't optimize at all. The fact that you have great, amazing software engineers or amazing ops people won't help you release faster unless you optimize at the bottleneck. And you might be already tired of all the books that I've thrown you, so this one comes in a nice way of a graphic novel, a business graphic novel. The Goal is kind of the book that the Phoenix Project is based on, and it's amazing by itself. And if you can consume it in a lighter format as a business graphic novel, I think this is great. Hardly a recommendation. A couple of more. We have regulations at our neck that they won't allow that. And we hear that a lot. How can we let developers deploy to production when our regulation requires separation of duty? Well, the answer is, instead of trying and certify each and every release, invest in certifying the pipeline. Once you certify the pipeline and the pipeline is protected from the regulatory point of view, everything is fine and you can release faster. And the last one, and this is like, it covers all of them. We cannot release faster. We need to check for, and then a bunch of other concerns. We need to check for better quality. We need to check for security. We need to check for compliance. And the answer to all of them is absolutely the same. Automate, automate, automate. If you can embed all those concerns of the days into your pipelines, that means you can move faster, you can implement DevOps and still be safe. So obviously, Alex succeeds in all of that. And after a successful transformation in their strong Fabric core, Alex becomes the Chief Information Officer. And who knows, maybe after successfully transforming this company, Alex go ahead and transforms many other companies, pushing all of them to be the elite performers. So with that, two things: the model and working with objections, tons of books, and that's all for me. We will have a nice discussion now about the questions that you have at jbaruch on Twitter. This is where you find me. When you tweet about this talk, don't forget the Cloud Native CA hashtag, and show notes is where all the books are. Well, obviously the slides, the video, but also all the links that I mentioned, everything, and a chance to win a pink Nintendo Switch Lite. And I think the fact that the pink makes it even more exciting. Go ahead and fill the raffle. That's all for me. And now time for questions or anything else that you want to chat about.
Wow, Baruch, that's a great talk. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that again and grab all the books. There's a lot of
Grab all the books. Yep.
Yeah, those are so many good ones. So yeah, questions are open. Either you can dump them into the chat or the Q&A feature in Zoom. All lines are open.
I think people just left because we're like, what, half an hour?
No, actually, nobody's leaving. You did great, Baruch. I think we're just gonna put also the survey at the same time. So while people asking the questions, people can provide the survey. We want to make sure the new platform is working, and the quality of the event and whatnot. We're promising to do a draw for the people who filled up the survey. So that in the beginning of the next event, we will make a draw for the Kubernetes masks. So I have an open agent policy, but we'll do the draw for the mask. So please, if you have a chance to fill up the survey, is really helpful for us. We appreciate that. Hey, Jason, any questions for Baruch? Or we're gonna start drinking beer?
I think it's time to start drinking beer.
Sounds fine to me.
So Baruch, I'm hoping you're gonna come visit Canada soon once the COVID thing's gonna finish.
I wanted so much. That was the trip that I did, the roadshow for your meetups was one of the really highlights of 2019 for me, and I look forward to do it again. That was so much fun.
Perfect. So I'm gonna be sharing the link for survey.
I'm going to share my screen so you have the QR code too.
Okay, thank you.
There we go.
Well, hopefully we'll have more DevOps companies now after Baruch's talk.
That was an awesome talk. My reading list just grew exponentially, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I can say the same thing. This event is recorded, so if you do want to catch Baruch Talks or George's talk again, we will post it after the event. We'll be sharing it on all our socials. I know I'll probably end up watching this one again.
Yep. All right, I think everyone's headed off for dinner.
All right. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
Thanks everyone for coming out.